When we think of ancient Rome, one of the most enduring and iconic figures that comes to mind is the gladiator, a powerful warrior who ruled the arenas from 207 BC to 404 AD. Gladiators were professional fighters, often seen as thrilling entertainment, battling to the death in grand arenas for the eager audience of Roman spectators. The name gladiator is believed to originate from the Latin word gladius, referring to a short, double-edged sword that was a common weapon of choice. These combatants were famous for their intense battles, a harsh reality that led most gladiators to live short lives, rarely living beyond their mid-20s. Despite the mortal danger they faced, these lethal sports became a form of mass entertainment, widely popular in ancient Rome. The best gladiators, demonstrating exceptional skill and valor, achieved a level of celebrity status, much like our modern sports stars. Now you may wonder, how did one become a gladiator? Many gladiators started as slaves, prisoners sentenced to death, or war captives. However, there were also volunteers, driven by the allure of potential fame and glory that awaited successful gladiators. Even one Roman emperor, Commodus, sought the thrill of the arena and participated in gladiatorial fights. Gladiators were typically owned by affluent businessmen who were on the constant hunt for potential warriors. The selection focused on young men exhibiting considerable skill and strength. Once chosen, these men underwent rigorous training in special institutions known as ludi, or gladiator schools, where they mastered the necessary combat techniques. Often located near the arenas, these schools were particularly prominent in Rome, boasting 3 such institutions next to the iconic Colosseum. The gladiator schools were similar to prisons. Fighters usually lived in small cells and were often chained up when they weren't training, to keep them from escaping. However, the trainees were also well cared for. After all, these gladiators represented substantial investments for their owners. As such, gladiators were nourished with high-quality food to build their strength and tended to by experienced physicians for injuries sustained in training or combat. There were different ways of fighting in the arena, and each gladiator was trained on how to use a specific set of weapons and armor. There were over 20 different kinds of gladiator, and each kind was called by a particular name based upon their equipment or the region of the empire they came from. Here are the most famous types that we know of. The bestiarii were beast fighters. They were condemned to fight wild animals and usually died in these battles. The Dimachari fought using 2 swords, one in each hand. Meanwhile, the Equites fought on horseback with a spear and the gladius, which was the standard sword used by the Roman legions. Most of the time, the Equites only fought each other. Then, there were the Hoplomachus, who were named after the Greek word for fighter, and based on classical Greek hoplites. They carried a spear, a short sword, and a small round shield. The Murmillo were known as the fishmen, as their helmets were decorated with pictures of fish. They wore scale armor, used a short Greek sword, and had an oblong Gallic shield. One of the most famous was the Samnite gladiator. This type was the most heavily armed warrior. They had large wooden shields, a helmet, a short sword, and greaves. The Retiarius were known as the netmen because they had weapons used by fishermen: a large fishing net, a trident, a dagger, and a metal shoulder guard. They fought by attempting to trap their opponents with the net and stabbing at them with the trident. The secutor was a kind of gladiator that had the same armor as a murmillo, including an oblong shield and a gladius sword. Finally, there were the Thraces. They had small rectangular shields, curved Thracian sword, a helmet decorated with a griffin, and 2 thigh-length greaves. Gladiators typically fought a handful of times a year in grand stadiums. The ground of these arenas was often covered in a specific type of sand called harina, which gives us the term arena. The most illustrious of these arenas was the Colosseum in Rome, capable of hosting over 50,000 spectators. On the day of the games, thousands of fans could be heard screaming their support for their favorite fighters. We are even told that emperors paid for food to be distributed to the watching crowds to ensure that people did not go hungry while enjoying the gory entertainment on offer. Just like modern sports, these fights were heavily regulated events, with referees on hand to ensure adherence to the various rules set out for different kinds of fights. While gladiators mostly faced each other in one-on-one combat, they could also be pitted against wild animals or made to fight in chariots. Pairings often involved gladiators with contrasting fighting styles, likely to maximize the spectacle for the audience. For example, a hoplomachus was often pitted against a murmillo, and the retiarius frequently fought with the secutor. If a fighter was lucky enough to win a gladiatorial combat, they were given a range of possible rewards. They could be given a branch of a palm tree as a trophy or a ceremonial crown. Other prizes known from history include silver dishes, prize money, and on some rare occasions, if a fighter achieved a significant number of victories over many years, they could even be awarded their freedom. Victorious gladiators, especially those who had a number of wins over time, became celebrities. We have found several graffiti from ancient Roman buildings that show that people loved and supported their favorite fighters, just like we love following our favorite sports teams today. Most people are surprised to learn that most fights did not end in the death of one of the combatants. Since the owners of the gladiators had spent so much time and money training and feeding the fighters, they wanted them to survive as long as possible. Instead, either the referee or the crowd would announce a winner and the fight would end. If a gladiator died at the end of a fight, their owner could fine the sponsor of the event to cover the cost of replacing the victim with a new slave. We are told that often, a gladiator who had defeated his opponent would often ask the crowd for their opinion about what they should do. The people watching could indicate with their hands whether the loser should live or die. Based upon the crowd's reaction, a referee or the emperor himself would then declare the outcome. If you love learning about ancient Rome, be sure to check out our explanation of the Punic Wars. I look forward to seeing you again soon in our next video.